You talk too much. Not always out loud. Sometimes the loudest noise is the conversation happening in your head. The explaining, the defending, the justifying, the endless narration of your life to an audience that isn't listening. And it's exhausting you. There's a reason the wisest people you know don't say much. It's not because they have nothing to offer. It's because they understand something you're still learning. That silence is power. That restraint is strength. That the space between words is where wisdom lives. The Stoics mastered this art 2,000 years ago. They knew that most people destroy themselves not through action, but through speech, through words spoken in anger, through explanations given to those who won't understand, through filling every silence with noise because they're terrified of what they might hear in the quiet. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth. He had the authority to speak and be heard by millions. And yet, one of his most repeated practices was this: say less than necessary. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood that words, once released, can never be taken back. That silence can be broken, but never repaired. That the moment you speak, you've already lost something you can never reclaim. Today, we're diving into the Stoic understanding of silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of wisdom. Not weakness, but the ultimate expression of self-control. And by the end of this exploration, you'll understand why what you don't say might be the most important thing about you. If you're here, you're not like most people. You're seeking depth in a world drowning in noise. You're looking for wisdom in an age of constant commentary. That makes you rare. And if this resonates with you, subscribe to this channel. Your attention here tells me you're ready for something real, something that works. Don't skip ahead, because each principle we'll explore builds on the last, creating a framework that will transform not just how you communicate, but how you exist in the world. Let's begin with the uncomfortable truth. Principle 1. The disease of over-explanation. You explain yourself too much, to people who don't care, to people who already made up their minds, to people who will use your words against you the moment it's convenient. And every time you do this, you give away your power. Think about the last time someone misunderstood you. What did you do? You explained, you clarified, you added context, you rewound the conversation trying to make them see what you meant. You spent energy, emotion, and time trying to control how someone else perceives you. And did it work? Probably not. Because here's what the Stoics understood. People don't misunderstand you accidentally. They misunderstand you on purpose. They hear what they want to hear. They interpret everything through the lens of their own biases, fears, and agendas. And no amount of explanation will change that. Epictetus said it plainly. If someone speaks badly of you, consider whether what they say is true. If it is, correct the fault. If it isn't, laugh it off. Notice what's missing from that instruction. Explanation, defense, justification. Either it's true, in which case you fix it, or it's false, in which case you dismiss it. There's no third option where you spend hours trying to convince someone of your intentions. But we do it anyway, don't we? Someone questions your decision. Instead of simply standing in your choice, you launch into a detailed explanation of your reasoning, as if their approval is required for you to proceed. Someone criticizes your work. Instead of accepting the feedback or ignoring it based on the source, you defend every choice you made, as if their understanding is necessary for your work to have value. Someone doubts your character. Instead of letting your actions speak, you try to convince them with words. As if people who've decided to think poorly of you will suddenly change their mind because you explained yourself well enough. This is the disease of over-explanation, and it's killing your credibility. Because every time you over-explain, you communicate something terrible, that you need their approval, that their opinion matters more than your own certainty, that you're not sure enough in yourself to simply be without justification. Confident people don't over-explain. They state their position and move on. They understand that their value isn't determined by whether everyone understands them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "I've often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. We value what strangers think more than what we know about ourselves. We'll exhaust ourselves trying to manage their perception while neglecting our own inner truth. And that's backwards. Your job isn't to make everyone understand you. Your job is to understand yourself so deeply that other people's misunderstanding becomes irrelevant. When you know who you are, when you're certain of your intentions, when you're clear on your values, you don't need to explain yourself to people who've already decided not to understand. You just move forward. In silence. With certainty. And that silence, it's not empty, it's full. Full of self-respect. Full of boundaries, full of the understanding that your peace matters more than their approval. Think about how much time you've wasted explaining yourself to people who weren't listening. Hours, days, maybe years of your life spent trying to control narratives you never had control over. What could you have created with that energy? What could you have built? What version of yourself could you have become? But you'll never know because you were too busy talking when you should have been moving. The Stoics practiced something powerful. They answered questions that were asked, but they didn't volunteer information to those who hadn't earned it. If someone genuinely wanted to understand, they engaged. But if someone was just looking for ammunition, for gossip, for drama, they said nothing. Because silence in the face of bad faith questions isn't rudeness, it's wisdom. You don't owe everyone access to your thought process. You don't owe everyone a window into your reasoning. You don't owe everyone an explanation for why you live the way you live. Some people deserve your words. Most don't. And learning the difference between those two groups will save you more suffering than almost anything else you learn in life. So here's your practice. For the next week, every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Ask yourself, did they actually ask? Do they actually care? Or am I just uncomfortable with their judgment? 9 times out of 10, you'll realize you are about to give an explanation that nobody requested and nobody needed. And in that realization, you'll find freedom. The freedom to simply be, without commentary, without justification, without the exhausting performance of making everyone understand. Principle 2. Silence as a weapon of truth. There's a type of person who can't stand silence. They fill every pause with words, every gap with noise, every moment of stillness with commentary. And it's not because they have something important to say. It's because silence reveals what words can hide. In silence, lies become obvious, pretenses collapse, performances fail. Silence forces people to sit with themselves, and most people will do anything to avoid that. But not you. Not anymore. Because once you understand how to use silence, you become unshakable. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." And nowhere is this more true than in conversation. When you remain silent in the face of provocation, something interesting happens. The other person fills the space with their own assumptions. They project, they spiral, they reveal themselves. Meanwhile, you've said nothing, given nothing away, maintained complete control. This isn't manipulation, it's clarity. Someone accuses you of something false. Your instinct is to defend immediately, to correct, to prove them wrong. But what if you didn't? What if you just looked at them calmly and said, nothing? Watch what happens. They'll keep talking. They'll add details. They'll try to justify their accusation. And with every word, they'll expose the weakness of their position, because lies require elaboration. Truth just sits there, undisturbed. When you defend yourself immediately, you validate their accusation as worthy of defense. You enter the arena they created. You play by their rules. But when you remain silent, You force them to carry the full weight of their words, and most accusations crumble under their own weight when they're not met with resistance. Marcus Aurelius faced constant criticism as emperor. People questioned his decisions, challenged his authority, spread rumors about his character, and his response? Most of the time, nothing. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." If someone is being dishonest, reactive, emotional, your silence is the most devastating response, because it demonstrates that you're not playing the same game, you're not in the mud with them, you're above it, observing, choosing your battles with intention rather than reacting to every provocation. But silence isn't just powerful in conflict, it's powerful in understanding. The best listeners are silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that listening is more valuable than speaking. When you're silent, you learn. When you're talking, you're just repeating what you already know. Think about the smartest person you know. Chances are they don't dominate conversations. They ask questions, they listen, they absorb. And when they do speak, it's precise, meaningful, worth hearing. That's not by accident, that's by design. They've trained themselves to value input over output, to prioritize understanding over being understood, and that makes them dangerous. In the best way, because people who listen well know things. They see patterns others miss. They understand motivations others overlook. They gather information while everyone else is busy broadcasting. Epictetus taught his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But we do the opposite. We speak twice as much as we listen. We wait for our turn to talk instead of actually hearing what's being said. And in doing so, we miss everything. The subtext, the emotion beneath the words, the truth people accidentally reveal when they think you're not paying attention. Silence gives you access to all of it. But there's another layer to this. Silence isn't just about what you don't say to others. It's about what you don't say to yourself. The internal narrative, the constant commentary, the judging, analyzing, narrating voice that never stops. That voice isn't wisdom, it's noise. Real insight comes in the gaps between thoughts. In the moments when you're not frantically trying to figure everything out. When you're just present, observing, allowing. The Stoics practiced this through what they called hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the mind. The part of you that can observe your thoughts without being consumed by them. When you cultivate internal silence, you create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you find choice. Someone insults you. The stimulus is their words. Your immediate thought might be anger, but if there's silence, if there's space, you can observe that anger without acting on it. You can think, "I notice I'm feeling angry. Is this anger useful? Does responding serve me, or can I let this pass?" That's power. That's self-mastery. Not suppressing the emotion, but creating enough internal silence to choose your response rather than being controlled by automatic reactions. Most people are slaves to their immediate reactions. Someone triggers them and they respond instantly, without thought, without consideration. And then they spend the next week dealing with the consequences of words they can't take back. But you're learning something different. You're learning that the pause is where power lives. That silence isn't empty space waiting to be filled. It's active, deliberate, strategic. It's you choosing not to give your energy to things that don't deserve it. It's you refusing to engage in battles that don't matter. It's you understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Principle 3. The discipline of unsaid words. There's a graveyard in your mind, filled with all the things you almost said but didn't. The insults you swallowed, the corrections you withheld, the arguments you chose not to have, the explanations you decided weren't worth giving, and every single one of them made you stronger, because restraint isn't weakness, it's the ultimate test of character. Any fool can speak. It takes wisdom to know when not to. Marcus Aurelius wrote this reminder to himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But he could have added, you have power over your words, not other people's understanding. Realize this, and you will find peace. Every time you choose not to say something, you're exercising a muscle, the muscle of self-control, of discernment, of strategic silence. Think about the last argument you had. Really think about it. How many of the words you said actually moved the conversation forward? How many were just reactions, defensiveness, ego protection? If you're honest, probably most of them. Because in the heat of conflict, we don't speak to communicate. We speak to win, to defend, to hurt back. And none of that creates understanding. It just creates more conflict. But what if, in that argument, you had said half as much? What if you had listened more and reacted less? What if you had let their words hang in the air instead of immediately countering them? The entire dynamic would have changed. Because silence forces accountability. When you don't immediately respond, people have to sit with what they said. They have to hear their own words echoing back at them, and often they'll realize how unreasonable they're being without you saying a word. This is the discipline of unsaid words, and it's one of the most difficult practices you'll ever undertake, because everything in you wants to respond, to correct, to defend, to have the last word. Your ego is screaming, but they're wrong, but they don't understand, but I need to explain. And you have to look at that ego and say, no, we're not doing this. Not because they're right, but because your peace is more important than being right. Seneca wrote, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay, not suppression, not pretending you're not angry. Just delay. Don't say it yet. Don't send that text yet. Don't fire off that email yet. Wait, let it sit. Let the heat cool, and then, from a place of clarity rather than reaction, decide if those words are still worth saying. 9 times out of 10, they're not. But you only learn this through practice, through repeatedly choosing silence when every fiber of your being wants to speak. And each time you do it, you get stronger. The urge weakens, the need for the last word diminishes. The compulsion to correct every wrong fades. Until one day you realize you don't care about winning arguments anymore. You care about maintaining your peace. And that's when you've truly mastered this principle. But let's talk about the social pressure to speak, because that's real. We live in a culture that interprets silence as ignorance, as complicity, as not having an opinion. Someone makes a statement in a group. Everyone looks at you, waiting for your response. The pressure builds. The silence feels uncomfortable, and so you speak. Not because you have something valuable to add, but because the silence feels like judgment. This is where most people fail. They let social pressure override their discernment. But the Stoics would ask, whose comfort are you prioritizing? Theirs or yours? If you speak to relieve their discomfort with your silence, you're giving them control over your voice. But if you can sit in that discomfort, if you can let the silence stretch without feeling compelled to fill it, you demonstrate something powerful. That you don't perform for others. That you speak when you have something worth saying, not just to prove you're paying attention. Epictetus taught, first learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. Not speak first and figure out what you mean later. Not speak because everyone else is speaking. Learn first, then speak. This means sometimes you'll be the quiet one in the room, and people will judge you for it. They'll think you're aloof, or uninterested, or that you don't have opinions. Let them think it, because their judgment of your silence reveals more about them than it does about you. People who need constant verbal validation are insecure. They need to hear themselves think out loud, They need external confirmation of their existence. But you're learning to exist without needing everyone to know what you're thinking. You're learning that your thoughts have value whether you broadcast them or not. You're learning that silence is a complete sentence. Now, this doesn't mean you become a mute. It doesn't mean you never speak up. It doesn't mean you passively accept everything. It means you become intentional with your words. You speak when it matters, when it will create understanding, when it will serve truth, when it aligns with your values. But you don't speak just to fill space, just to be heard, just to prove you're smart or right or relevant. You speak with purpose, and that makes every word count. Marcus Aurelius had an empire to run, decisions that affected millions, conversations that shaped history, and yet he practiced this discipline daily, choosing carefully what to say, holding back what didn't need to be said, understanding that his silence could be as powerful as his decrees. If an emperor could practice this restraint, so can you. In your relationships, in your workplace, in your daily interactions, you can choose to say less and mean more, to let your actions speak louder than your explanations, to trust that people who matter will understand, and people who don't understand don't matter. This is freedom, not freedom to say whatever you want, but freedom from the compulsion to say anything at all. Principle 4. Silence in suffering. Here's where it gets really difficult. Because the moments when you most want to speak are the moments when you're hurting, when someone wrongs you, when life feels unfair, when you're carrying pain that feels too heavy to bear alone. Every instinct screams, talk about it, share it, make people understand what you're going through. And there's value in that, in vulnerability, in connection, in not suffering in isolation. But there's also value in something the Stoics practiced that makes most people uncomfortable: suffering in silence. Not because you're hiding, but because some pain is meant to be processed internally before it's shared externally. Marcus Aurelius experienced unimaginable loss. Children who died. A wife he loved who may have betrayed him. Advisors who disappointed him, the constant weight of responsibility, and he wrote about it, privately, in his journals, for himself. But publicly, he maintained composure, he led, he functioned, not because he was suppressing his emotions, but because he understood something crucial. Broadcasting your suffering doesn't reduce it. Often, it amplifies it. When you constantly talk about your pain, you rehearse it, you relive it, you keep it fresh and active instead of allowing it to process and integrate. This is different from healthy expression, from therapy, from trusted conversations with people who can actually help. This is about the constant need to make sure everyone knows you're struggling, to post about it, to bring it up in every conversation, to make your pain your identity. The Stoics would say, this is self-indulgent, and it's keeping you stuck. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." When you constantly verbalize your suffering to anyone who will listen, you're suffering before it's necessary. You're recreating the pain every time you describe it. But when you can sit with your pain in silence, when you can process it internally, something different happens. You develop resilience, strength, the capacity to carry difficulty without it breaking you. And that capacity is everything. Because life will always include pain, loss, disappointment, betrayal, grief. The question isn't whether you'll experience these things. The question is, can you carry them with dignity? Dignity doesn't mean pretending you're fine. It means not making your pain everyone else's responsibility. It means processing privately before you share publicly. It means choosing carefully who gets access to your vulnerable moments. It means understanding that not everyone deserves to witness your breaking points. Think about the people you respect most, the ones who've been through hell and came out stronger. Did they broadcast every struggle? Did they perform their pain for an audience? Probably not. They suffered, they processed, they integrated. And then, maybe they shared what they learned. Not for sympathy, but for service, to help others who might face similar challenges. That's the difference. Sharing from a place of healing versus sharing from a place of bleeding. When you're still bleeding, you need silence, you need space, you need to tend your wounds privately before you display them publicly. Because the world doesn't owe you gentle handling. People aren't always kind to those who are hurting. And broadcasting your vulnerability to those who might exploit it isn't brave. It's careless. Epictetus, who was enslaved and physically disabled, said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." What's in your power? How you process your pain, how you metabolize difficulty, how you choose to carry suffering. What's not in your power? Other people's responses, their sympathy, their understanding. So why waste energy trying to manage their perception of your suffering? Why perform pain for people who can't help you anyway? Suffer in silence when silence serves you, when it protects your dignity, when it allows you to process without performance, and speak when speaking serves you, when it creates connection, when it leads to understanding or healing. But know the difference, and choose intentionally. This doesn't mean you become stoic in the toxic sense. Cold, unfeeling, disconnected. It means you become selective, boundaried, protective of your inner world. It means you understand that not every thought needs to be expressed. Not every feeling needs to be announced. Not every struggle needs to be shared. Some things are sacred, private, yours alone. And keeping them that way isn't isolation. It's self-respect. The world will demand your story, your explanation, your performance of vulnerability. But you don't have to give it. You can carry your pain with quiet strength. Process it in your own time. Share it when and how you choose. And in that choice, you reclaim power over your own narrative. Not the power to avoid suffering, but the power to suffer on your own terms. With dignity, with intention, with silence when silence serves. Principle 5. The final word belongs to silence. At the end of every conversation, there's a choice. Do you need the last word? Or can you let silence close the chapter? This is the ultimate test of ego, because the person who needs the last word is the person who's still trying to win, still trying to control, still trying to prove. But the person who can walk away in silence, they've already won. Because they've won something more valuable than the argument. They've won themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." The insane are those who fight every battle, who need to correct every misconception, who can't let anything go. The wise are those who choose their battles with precision, who understand that most arguments are beneath them, who can let others be wrong without needing to fix them. This is maturity. This is power. This is freedom. Think about how many conversations you've dragged out because you needed the last word. How many arguments you extended because you couldn't let their final comment stand. How did that serve you? Did you win anything worth having? Or did you just waste energy proving a point to someone who wasn't listening anyway? The final word belongs to silence because silence can't be argued with, can't be twisted, can't be used against you later. When you end a conversation with silence, you end it completely. There's nowhere else to go, nothing left to say, and that drives people crazy, especially people who are used to getting reactions from you. They'll throw out provocations, they'll make outrageous statements, they'll try anything to get you to break your silence and engage. And if you don't, if you simply refuse to participate, you've taken all their power. Because their power depended on your reaction, on your emotional investment, on your need to respond. But when you don't give them that, when you just observe and say nothing, they're left holding their own poison, and eventually they'll have to drink it themselves. This is what Seneca meant when he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." If someone is trying to provoke you into anger, chaos, drama, your silence is the most devastating response, because it proves they have no power over you, that their words land on stone and break, that you're not available for the games they want to play, and in that unavailability, you free yourself, not just from them, but from the part of yourself that used to need to engage, that used to need to defend, that used to need the last word. You've outgrown that version of yourself, and silence is how you prove it. But here's the beautiful part about mastering silence. When you do finally speak, people listen, because they've learned that your words are rare, intentional, worth hearing. You're not the person who talks constantly about nothing. You're the person who speaks rarely about things that matter, and that makes all the difference. Epictetus taught his students that the beginning of wisdom is silence, the second stage is listening, and only the third stage is speaking. Most people skip straight to speaking. They never develop the foundation of silence and listening that makes speech valuable. But you're different. You're building that foundation, day by day, conversation by conversation, choosing silence when everyone else is choosing noise. And it's making you formidable, in the best way. People will start to notice. They'll comment on how calm you are, how unshakable, how nothing seems to rattle you, and they might interpret it as aloofness, as not caring, as being distant. Let them, because the people who matter will understand. They'll recognize that your silence isn't absence, it's presence, deep, intentional, powerful presence. You're not disengaged, you're selectively engaged, choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. And that discernment, that's what separates the wise from the reactive. So here's what I need you to understand as we close. Silence isn't something you achieve once. It's something you practice daily. Every conversation is an opportunity. Every conflict is a test. Every moment of discomfort with quiet is a chance to grow stronger. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. The urge to explain weakens. The need for the last word fades. The compulsion to fill every pause disappears. Until one day you realize you're comfortable in silence, yours and others. You don't need to perform, don't need to prove, don't need to broadcast. You simply exist with depth, with intention, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that their value isn't determined by how much they say. This is what the Stoics discovered, what Marcus Aurelius practiced while ruling an empire, what Epictetus taught from the position of a former slave, what Seneca embodied even as he faced death. That silence is not weakness, it's the ultimate strength, not the silence of fear, but the silence of choice, of discernment, of power, and it's available to you. Right now, in this moment. Not someday when you've mastered everything, not when you're wiser or older or more experienced. Now, in the next conversation you have, in the next moment someone tries to provoke you, in the next argument you could have but choose not to, that's where the practice lives, in the small, unglamorous, moment-by-moment choices to say less, to listen more, to let silence do its work. What would your life look like if you stopped explaining yourself to people who aren't listening? Who would you become if you let your actions speak louder than your words? How much peace could you find if you stopped trying to control everyone's understanding? The answers are waiting in the silence. Thank you for being here, for giving this your complete attention, for being someone who values wisdom over noise. Subscribe if this resonated. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, practice. Because knowing this changes nothing. Living it changes everything. Stay strong, stay silent when it serves you, and continue your journey toward wisdom. I'll meet you in the quiet.